Welcome everyone, Tactical Lich here. Today we have an exciting battle from the Friday Night Fight tournament where I was playing against a top tier player race. He is playing as the Dark Elves versus my Empire, and traditionally Dark Elves has the advantage on this matchup. So I need some sneaky tricks to even the playing field. For the army builds here, a front line of spears mixed in with great swords backed up by more spears and a couple halberdiers. And at the back there, 4 units of Empire Knights providing some heavily armored mobility to block off enemy cavalry charges and also pin down dragons, run down routed units and whatnot. And for the skirmishing forces, 2 units of pistoliers. They are cheap enough to absorb the Scourge Runner fire effectively and also can do some pretty good damage with their dual wielding pistols. As for the leadership here, 3 characters, my stat debuff combo, Boris Topbringer with his full kit, Blood Roar, Hold the Line, Crush the Weak, White Cloak of Ulrich, and Midland Room Fang, as well as his Deadly Onslaught and Foe Seeker. Just a lot of stat debuffs to lower enemy battle effectiveness and force them an early rout with a combination of Blood Roar and Crush the Weak, a combination of minus 12 leadership. As for the foot characters, we have a Grey Wizard coming in with Enfeebling Foe, Withering, as well as the Malkov's Mystifying Miasma. For the other character, the Witch Hunter, coming in with only Accusation and his armor-piercing magical missiles. On the other side of the battlefield, Race is going for an interesting pick for sure. A mix of Bleak Swords, Dread Spears, and a couple Blackout Corsairs. Blackout Corsairs traditionally does really well against state troops, but against the Great Swords, things might be a bit more finicky. 2 units of Reaper Bolt Throwers, possibly to counteract the Empire Artillery, but unfortunately for my opponent here, I'm not bringing any on the Empire side. And at the back there, 2 units of Witch Elves, and also a few Cavalry. A couple Koan Knights and a single Dark Rider, and more Koan Knights in the forest. On the other side of the battlefield, 2 Vanguard deployed Harpies leading the army, Supreme Sorceress coming in with the Lore of Soul Stealer, as well as the Opal Amulet. And that's it for the army builds. Now let's get this battle started and see what happens. As soon as the battle begins, the pistoliers are moving in to get some cheeky shots off, some of them even aiming at the rather exposed Reaper Bolt Thrower who have been deployed in the front of their formation so that they can start dueling the Empire Artillery immediately. But there is no Empire Artillery to duel, so the Reaper Bolt Throwers instead suffered some pretty devastating skirmishing fire. Now, on the other side there, Supreme Sorceress trying to force back my pistoliers, but with Boris Todbringer so close by, she was persuaded to do something else instead, pulling back, while on the other side there, Dark Riders sallying forth to chase off my pistoliers will be countercharged by the Empire Knights, taking substantial damage. Empire Knights will be following up, trying to pursue them, but then probably will be running into some Bleak Swords. They need to pull back as soon as possible. Now, in the front line there on the left, there is not much going on as the Supreme Sorceress is just standing by with Witch Elves and Koan Knights moving forth. Blackout Corsairs moving against the Great Swords should be a great anti-infantry fight between the 2 units, but Great Swords will no doubt win this fight, especially with the Malkov's Mystifying Miasma draining the health of the Blackout Corsairs. But the Supreme Sorceress is positioning herself in a perfect point for a breath attack against my Great Swords, and that is exactly what she's gonna do, doing some pretty nice damage, lowering their melee attack as well. But right now, the Blackout Corsairs have been terrified by the presence of Boris Todbringer and will not be coming back soon. On the right flank there, with more Dark Elf mobility investment, the Empire Knights and Pistoliers were enveloped in the middle of a whole lot of Dark Elf cavalry. Being overwhelmed, I was forced to throw in more Empire Knights just to hold down this flank. Now in the middle there, a massive engagement has started, Soul Stealer draining the health of the Great Swords and Boris Todbringer, while Blackout Corsairs receiving an accusation, lowering their melee defense down to a meager 4, falling victim to the Great Swords who are fighting in full strength, and that opens up a gap in the Dark Elf front line, allowing me to slip in some mobility and get to the artillery at the back. While Boris Todbringer dueling the Supreme Sorceress, this is not a great fight for the Dark Elf caster, but with the support of the Koan Knights charging in, especially when buffed up by Murderous Prowess, they can and will destroy Boris Todbringer with their boosted damage. And that's not it. On the side there are some Witch Elves surging into this battle as well. They have already torn through one of my spear units, shattering them, and are now engaging Boris Todbringer using their rampaging effect to lock him in this pitched battle. To counteract the Cold War Knights, I'll be dropping in a Malkov's Mystifying Miasma. At the back there, some Empire Knights were able to slip through the gap in the Dark Elf front line and will be running down the Reaper Bolt Throwers, but the Dark Elf Cold War Knights on the far side there, after cleaning up the Empire Knights and Pistoliers, should be able to come back for support. While back to the middle, Boris is definitely not having a good time, surrounded by so many Dark Elf troops, a lot of them having anti-large and armor piercing as well. Supreme Sorcerers of Dark Magic munching up Boris and his Griffin. However, the state troop support, the Halberdiers and Spears, managed to screen out the Cold War Knights and the Witch Elves, allowing Boris to extricate himself from this messy engagement. The Pistoliers also trying their best to do damage against Supreme Sorcerers, but with the additional 20% ward save plus the healing from the Soul Stealer as well, she is tanking it just fine. On the far side there, Dark Riders will be cleaning up the Empire Knights with the support of some more tattered Dark Riders and Dread Spears, and the last of my Empire Knights are busy with the Reaper Bolt Throwers and their protectors. They will be overwhelmed by this very healthy unit of Cold War Knights and will be shut down. Boris Todbringer has returned, but he is indeed quite swift on his Griffin there, especially when buffed up by Foe Seeker, additional 25% speed. The Sorcerers try to use a breath attack on Boris, but Boris effortlessly evaded that attack. Though now Boris has engaged in melee combat, presenting a chance for the Supreme Sorcerers to dive in and finish him off. But things took a sharp turn for the Dark Elves. The Supreme Sorceress received an accusation and her leadership has a sudden dip. This is not only because she is surrounded by a lot of enemy troops, but also there are multiple morale debuffs in play. Discouraged by abilities -12, a very nice thing about Boris Todbringer is that he has area of effect leadership debuffs. Crush the Weak -4 leadership because the Supreme Sorceress has less than 50% leadership, and also on top of that we have Blood Roar, a consistent -8 leadership, taking a heavy toll on the Dark Elves morale. The Supreme Sorcerers of Dark Magic originally teetering on the edge of routing, but now with that -12 leadership, she is definitely routing, especially when shot up by the Pistoliers, having an additional debuff of being shot by missiles. Wait, damage by artillery? That makes no sense. Empire doesn't even have artillery. Probably got shot by their own bolt throwers? I don't know. Anyways, let's go back to the battle itself. The Dark Elf Lord has been routed, and this is clutch for the Empire. If not for this rout, the Supreme Sorceress could have finished Boris for sure with Soul Stealer and her armor-piercing melee attacks. But right now, the Supreme Sorceress is being escorted away by the Pistoliers, who have also dealt some good damage to her, with the accusation lowering the Supreme Sorceress' armor and missile resistance. Before the debuff ran out, they definitely did some good damage with their dual-wielding pistols. Now, for the melee fights in general, the Empire is definitely losing against the higher quality Dark Elves, considering there is still a very healthy unit of Cold War Knights in the fray. However, I do have one way to deal with them, and that is the Grey Wizard. Without SEMs threatening him, he is free to roam around the battlefield and use his spells, particularly the Malkov's Mystifying Miasma, providing some very reliable damage against the armored Cold War Knights, bypassing their protection and damaging them directly. And now, with the death of the Supreme Sorceress of Soul Stealer, the Empire troops are in a bit of an advantage here, with their Lord still alive, providing that terror and also leadership aura. There are some Dark Riders fighting some Empire Knights right now, but they're so depleted, whoever wins doesn't really make much difference in the battle. Some Pistoliers have been sacrificed, drawing away the attention of the Cold War Knights. This is buying time for the Grey Wizard to slowly but surely working down those Cold War Knights with the Malkov's Mystifying Miasma, while the Grey Wizard himself is shutting down the last Reaper Bolt Thrower with the help of Boris Todbringer. And that is basically it for the Dark Elf army here. The remaining Cold War Knights are all very tattered, and most of the Dark Elf infantry has been routed, except this one healthy Dread Spears, but balance of power is edging more and more in the favor of the Empire army. Boris Todbringer will be flying around. Every time he drops in, he'll induce a terror rout or straight up inducing a rout. Another Malkov's finishing off the Cold War Knights, and that's army losses. Before the nerf to Malekith, this matchup is dominantly in the favor of Dark Elves because Malekith is so hard to kill. However, once Malekith got that price increase, the Supreme Sorceress became the meta, which Boris Todbringer had a much better chance against. For the rest of the army, the Great Swords trade well into the Dark Elf infantry. While the Empire Knights didn't really do much damage, they were mostly there just holding down the Cold War Knights and Dark Riders, just to buy more time for Boris to fight the Supreme Sorceress and the Empire infantry to crump the Dark Elf front line. For the halberdiers, one of them did really well, probably dragged down a whole lot of Koan Knights, and the other one not so much. The pistoliers, one of them did well, one of them did not. The one that did well definitely were the one chasing down the Supreme Sorceress, while the state troops were, well, just state troops. They were no match for the Bleak Swords, Black Ark Corsairs, and Witch Elves. However, the Witch Hunter did okay here, earning back 300 gold value, but most of his value accrued are not for his damage, but more on his accusation, debuffing troops like the Black Ark Corsairs at the beginning and Supreme Sorceress in the mid-game, making them more vulnerable to incoming damage. As for the Great Wizard, he definitely carried a bit in the late game there, with the Malkov's Mystifying Miasma draining away the health of the remaining Koan Knights, and his Enfeebling Foe spell was quite key in nerfing the Supreme Sorceress, giving Boris a better chance to beat her down. Now for the Dark Elf army here, the Supreme Sorceress with Soul Stealer did a lot of damage, kind of expected, with her being one of the most meta lords, but the leadership debuffs and stat debuffs from Boris Todbringer successfully brought her down. While the Koan Knights, they did pretty decently in this battle here. Some of them did a lot of damage to Boris Todbringer for sure. While the Witch Elves cleave through the state troops, but they are quite fragile themselves, so not too much damage on their end. The Reaper Bolt Throwers were compromised rather early, while the rest of the infantry here not doing a whole lot damage, being outclassed by the Great Swords. The mobility didn't do too much damage as well. Their intended target were the Empire missiles, but as you can see here, I didn't bring any missiles other than the Pistoliers. Anyways, that's it for today's battle. I hope you all enjoy it, and if you want to see more, be sure to hit the subscribe button and keep an eye out for new video uploads. Thank you for watching, and I'll see you in the next one. Tactical Lich, signing out.